scheduled, while outgoing President Trump is tweeting furiously not just falsehoods about the election, but literally deranged and debunked conspiracy theories. Trump still refusing to acknowledge the plain fact that he has been defeated by President-elect Joe Biden and has, for the most part, Mr. Trump, withdrawn from public view. The coronavirus pandemic, meanwhile, is getting worse, but President Trump is still refusing to develop any new plan to combat this crisis, with several more of his own advisors contracting coronavirus after attending campaign events around Election Day. So, in essence, President Trump appears to be desperately, even pathetically, fighting to keep a job that he has no apparent interest in responsibly performing. And while most Republican lawmakers are completely enabling this behavior, a small number are now doing the bare minimum by acknowledging the simple fact that President-elect Joe Biden won. Let's reiterate this for viewers out there.
This is really interesting. Now, when Joe Biden is heading toward, his beach house in Delaware, his family to actually stay there with the president-elect, trying to actually at least spend this event. But if there is no official recognition from the President Donald Trump, this outgoing president is really almost like delusionally holding on to his job. He's been actually waging a very desperate fight. He's been actually holding on to clutching and the very devastating prospect of he's winning the game, even though chances are almost foregone, right? So, but a majority of Republicans are actually egging on this type of behavior. There are actually like accomplices because they were abetting this type of wild delusion of them. But only a fraction of a Republican to say, oh, President should acknowledge the fact that there was no election fraud and Joe Biden clearly won the game. It's time for our president to make concession. But the problem is, right now, the nation is in the middle of a pandemic crisis, but the absence of a president is so palpable, there is no even single unified plan. However, the number of COVID patients are growing so steeply, precipitously. It would be so threatening. Every single day we renew the records. This would be so severe enough to create a repercussion throughout the nation, from East Coast to West Coast, except some minor districts. That's a real problem. But there is no single recognition from President Donald Trump, who's been actually behind the keyboard to to actually scheme a plot which could either pardon him or which could either turn the table around him. How would you actually turn the tables at this moment? The presidency is rounding the corner, just like, the CNN guys actually mocked. I remember Tim Sciutto, he literally was laughing at President Donald Trump. His presidency is rounding the corner, and he is, this outgoing president is phasing into history. So he's his chapter is about to be closed. Right? He is going out. Think about it. COVID-19 is not rounding the corner, but Donald Trump is rounding the corner, and the presidency is really going steeply into history. It's really going down in history. That means, it's time for him to step down. It would only be a matter of time. This, one morning dew, would it be evaporated? We are just seconds away. Keep going. People, have a little patience. We're going to actually see the final chapter of Donald Trump's hold on power. That's what Tim Sciutto said. In this nuance, because when he actually said that, Donald Trump's presidency is rounding the corner, I can sense that. He was internally very much gratified. It was very palpable, so I never actually want to watch a CNN. I don't like Donald Trump, but it's always too obvious. They're really too, I don't know. I just don't like it. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but I never liked that kind of, what can we say?
Who might be worried because of this unprecedented, unhinged behavior by the outgoing president. Legal experts, Democrats and Republicans, say there is no credible path for Donald Trump to challenge the election results in all, or even really any.
Everyone is just so appalled to witness this unprecedented, unhinged behavior of Donald Trump. Because, this outgoing president is so like creepy, crazy, stir crazy, in the sense that we're gonna be almost out of imagination. No one in the wildest imagination to experience in the modern day this much delusional and practically foolish and lunatic president who's been constantly clutching at this conspiratorial scenario, even rejected by the right wing experts. Some of them Republicans are actually still doing it. In general, tell the truth, a whole lot of legislators from the Republican Party, from the GOP, they're actually, either in an implied way or in an explicit way, endorse this type of recklessness. But the problem is that there are a growing number of people. There is a rift growing, especially following from the issuance of the official statement from various states' election officials, as I've already actually read from New York Times. You just actually watching me, right? So there is a growing chasm inside the Republican Party saying that, oh, President, please accept this. You should actually make the concession to heal the wound. The nation can no longer endure this type of fraction. Please do something. Act like adults, There is a growing mounting pressure on this retiring president, who's just actually simply is just steps away from getting himself out of the White House, right? He's no longer the president of the people. But legal experts, regardless of their political affiliations or political ideologies, they all say something in common. What? There is no chance this president, somehow managed to pull off a magical scenario, as if, just to wield a magic wand to tackle, all different states' election results that he wants to refute, if any. Technically, there is no single state that could be feasible to be annihilated. You know what? In his wildest imaginations, he could actually come up with a scheme that would overthrow or subvert any of these election results that he really wants to deny. There is a consensual agreement that has never been officially voiced, but there is a sentiment prevailing, among the legal experts who studied election laws. There would be almost no single scenario that would be feasible and powerful enough to negate all different election results in disfavor of Donald Trump. Technically, if any one state whose results can be challengeable, then that would be good for him. Because in reality, even actually refuting one state's results could be also a tough battle and a high bar. There is a high bar for him to overcome. It's a tall order. Even actually, define one single state's election results would be a tall order. Very difficult. It's a tough battle. There is a high bar for him to overcome if he ever wants to move beyond the threshold of invalidity. That's very difficult. But even actually, he audaciously claims that he could negate or annihilate or nullify multiple states' election outcomes. Can you imagine that? That would be possible? No. There is a really implied consensus amongst legal experts and legal advisors across the political spectrum, across the aisle, either from the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. There's no way. It's impractical. It's not really, down to earth. He should come down to earth. He should actually get back into reality, snap out of, hey, President Donald Trump, please step out of your wildest imagination. What are you doing? You're actually holding on to, your fantasy scenario. It's time for you to wake up and smell the coffee. Please. That's what they were saying. What? Do you think that my feelings are not good enough? Who said that? Can you name some of them?
Of the states that he needs to reverse their results so he can win the election that he clearly, legally, and legitimately has lost.
You know what? He's, wildest imagination is like this. he should actually know in the first place tackle illegality or impropriety conducted by the election officials throughout the nation. And he first really needs to obtain a legality to reverse the existing election results from certain states. Per state, Pennsylvania, certain in a district in Pennsylvania, he just really wants to overthrow that. You cannot accept that one. Then he first really needs to receive a permission from the court to abrogate, nullify the current result obtained on November 3rd, right? Then he just actually really needs to win the game. That means if he ever wants to stay in the game, he wants to carry that state, which technically was not for him. He was already defeated by Joe Biden legally and legitimately and justly. There was no chance he would have made it differently. Not in a feasible scenario, not in a plausible scenario. There was no chance that you could have done it differently because he was indeed a loser with a big L. There's no chance. This is not even actually within the margin of errors. It's relatively a big, huge chasm. So if he ever wants to turn it back, first he needs to obtain the nullification permission, which it could legitimately invalidate the very defeat of his. And he should actually go through another tough uphill battle, which is recount. After recount, he should actually carry the state by having greater amount of ballots allocated to him. That's what he should do. That's not done. Even the reversal of the election results would not be the end of the story, because there should be another recount procedure to tabulate each vote once more to clarify the actual consequence, and he should win it. Otherwise, there's no chance he could actually be the president of the United States. The chances are almost zero. But he is so delusional enough to spread this argument that he can make a difference. I don't know why in the first place he just really wants to sell this type of far-fetched idea. That's anyone's guessing. Your guess is as good as mine. That's anybody's guess. I mean, no one knows. Maybe he's actually he's been in need of having a negotiation for his political future, as well as not really political future, but he's a really future as a civilian. Probably he doesn't really want to be an inmate from White House to jail. That's really the worst case scenario. So he wants to avoid it at all costs. So he's been actually even thinking about self-pardoning him. I've heard about him masturbating, but I've never heard of a self-pardoning as a president of the United States. That's interesting, right? Something that I've never even imagined before. And but this is really funny. Donald Trump is not recently actually seen by many different media outlets, right? He has been keeping a low profile. He's not actually trying to make himself known. No one really knows what he's up to, right? Because it's really kind of peculiar because so many people are dying because of the COVID-19, and more people are diagnosed with it. But the problem is the president, who's still in charge of everything, would not actually make any single statement that would acknowledge the gravity of the systematic failure. That's the real thingy. But in addition to that, he's been actually tweeting this kind of very out of touch with reality, delusional lunatic, or what do we actually call that? Such dysfunctional messages, saying that almost 2.7 million ballots were stolen, or deleted, or annihilated. These type of arguments are so devoid of the truth or sense of reason. The people are frustrated, but his fellow Republicans are technically part of this complicity. They were actually, doing more and more by actually silencing themselves or even actively defending his legitimacy, that liberals are so dangerous he couldn't do anything. Yeah, that's what's happening right now. But the thing is, he really needs to obtain a permission allowing him to defy the results proven in order to claim his victories from these battlegrounds where he was indeed brutally slaughtered by Joe Biden. With legitimacy, he was actually defeated legally and legitimately and justly. Yeah, there was nothing illegal. There was no unlawful or outlawed manipulation that might rig and game the system in favor of Joe Biden. No election official from these back to the states would acknowledge that. That could even give a greater power to Donald Trump's selling story. It's really his shop story.
Now, officials in the White House know this and acknowledge it privately. Republicans in Congress know this and acknowledge it privately. The only questions remaining are the extent to which President Trump will continue to be a sore loser and the lies that he will continue to tell his supporters on his way out the door. But none of that is going to change what happens on January 20th, when President-elect Joe Biden takes the oath of office and moves into the White House.
Mm-hmm. So it's really kind of unclear what type of reaction Republicans would demonstrate and how he would actually, how Donald Trump would wrap up his final stage of a presidency, or, what type of sabotaging scheme he would be plotting on his way out, right? These kind of different scenarios are completely murkier than ever before. How his radical supporters would react to this, none of them are actually known. We do not have a clear picture here. It's really anybody's guessing. No one really knows what would happen. But one thing for sure that can be ascertained is none of these events are going to change what would happen on January 20th. That's really the day Joe Biden, the current president-elect from the Democratic Party, is going to assume the presidency by making a solemn oath to be sworn into the office. That's not going to be affected for sure. There must be not, because of those watchers, we the people should have never let that happen. That was really the very gravity. He's very solemnly swearing that none of these destructive efforts are going to change the very consequence of the Democratic election. That means Joe Biden is going to be our next president. That's what he says, not me.
And as CNN's Caitlin Collins reports for us now, one person who spoke to President Trump is now describing the president as dejected over his rejection.
CNN's White House correspondent Caitlin Collins actually reports on this, and she's going to actually deliver the story if I ever click this button. But she already actually had an interview with related sources who actually clarifies Donald Trump's condition as dejected, a person who's been downtrodden, who's been so dispirited because of this rejection of the new, rejection of the election results petition. He was declined. Donald Trump's decision. Not really decision. Donald Trump's petition for a recount was simply ignored and declined, right? There was no legitimacy that might actually enable people to open up the ballot box once more out of suspicion that there had been a certain foreign intervention or, illegal hijacking or contamination that could really pollute the nature and the purity of the election. There was none. It was a really kind of conspiratorial theory. So he was completely denied. He was, rejected because of this, he's really dejected. Dejected means he's been dispirited. According to different sources, the Kayleen Collin somehow actually met, because she's a White House correspondent. She actually is going to come out right now. If I ever click this button, she says that he was really dejected, following from a source, because she was told that Donald Trump was in despair, and that this mood is persistent because of his efforts to tackle the results of election was fruitless and futile, because no authorities from those controversial states, so-called controversial states, would like to join them. They never reciprocate the suspicion felt by Donald Trump. They just simply turn this petition down. That's the real reason why he felt so dispirited and disheartened and downtrodden
by American voters.
안녕하세요. 안녕하세요. 잠시만.
President Donald Trump remained behind closed doors today with no public appearances on the horizon. He hasn't taken questions from reporters in over a week and hasn't spoken publicly since last Thursday. Instead, he's waged war against the election from his phone, firing off tweets claiming without evidence the race was fraudulent, as his advisors privately wonder how long he'll keep going. Sources tell CNN the president has been dejected following his loss, but has continued to meet daily with political advisors who are doubtful their legal challenges will succeed. Several
President Donald Trump, officially never made any type of public statement, and he refuses to answer any of the questions from reporters. And since Thursday, he never actually partook in any type of public appearances. He was never been part of any type of ceremonies or public appearances ever since Thursday. He was actually behind the closed doors, and he has been in that way for so long. He's been actually keeping a low profile. That's really true. This is really the first time almost, he's been this much, unseen and unheard, probably. But he's been constantly unloading his Twitter bullets by composing, such a bogus and a lunatic message saying that the election results were fraudulent. They were actually full of wrongful and manipulated nut jobs from the liberals. That was what has been said. Donald Trump is really behind the keyboard, behind the monitor, who's been typing this message on and on and on. But according to different sources, he was really dejected. That means he was just so dispirited immediately following from the election loss, because he could not actually, win the several contested and divided battlegrounds, because he definitely wants to be the winner from Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, but he actually was defeated by big margins relatively. So he was very much depressed to hear that. So he was disheartened for sure. That was notified by his close confidants and advisors. So, according to different sources covered by the CNN's White House correspondent, he was very much emotionally affected in a negative sense, right? But the thing is, he would have never actually stopped fighting for his victory. No matter how ludicrous that might be, he's been constantly composing a Twitter message. He's been tweeting. One thing he could have never stopped, even at this moment, is tweeting. Even though he was never been seen and spotted by any sources, he never actually made a public debut or public appearances. He just, couldn't bring himself out of the White House. He's been behind the closed doors for days. Since Thursday, he's been actually in that way. He's been like in a homebody. No one actually, had history of witnessing what he's up to. But, his close advisors even actually, reported on this. he's been constantly in touch with the political advisors who are also very doubtful and skeptical of his winning chances and opportunities by actually tackling the election results. Even if he somehow managed to obtain a chance to delegitimize this already publicly recognized election results, there was no chance he would have possibly be the winner of this election. So, you know what, those political advisors are also very, much in confusion. They were actually scratching their heads, they cannot actually even figure out what he's truly thinking on his mind. Because, it's really kind of a great mystery. Everyone is kind of scratching their head. Everyone around him cannot even actually, wrap their mind around. They cannot actually put their head together to dissuade him from pursuing this delusion, because no one can even actually come up with a brilliant idea that might terminate his unfounded passion for presidency after this defeat. He's about to go out, but he's not facing the truth. There should be a reality check needed, but he's not accepting it. That's really the reason why, even actually people around him were somewhat skeptical. They were actually, also emotionally taunted. Affected. That's very interesting. Donald Trump is so dispirited. He's been actually downtrodden. That means he's been downcast. He's emotional. I don't want to actually abuse this word, composure. That means his mood is really gloomy, tell the truth, because he's a perspective for winning the election is also bleak. So as much as, his chances for winning the election are gloomy, his mood reflects that sentiment to be very downcast. It's a really kind of proportional relationship. As much as he's changed, his re-election bid looks really gloomy, Donald Trump's mood or feeling is bleak and gloomy. That's very funny. I don't understand why he's actually doing this, but it's anybody's guessing. But he's been constantly, staying in touch with the political advisors or any type of strategist. That's a very, very funny, because he's been tinkering with whatever best solutions and options that could bring his vessel forward. But technically, there is no card powerful enough to trump everything. He has no joker. There is no straight, straight or flush. And there is no way he can actually turn things around. There is no powerful one blow he can actually deal. Right? That's the problem.
Said it's only a matter of time before Trump acknowledges his loss, but they believe that will come with a tease that he'll run in 2024.
When someday I live.
You know what? Maybe actually, say that it would only be a matter of time that he would recognize his loss, no matter how bitter that might be. But the thing is, it would have definitely come with the sentiment, because he's been actually, again, imbuing people with this type of a radical stance, saying that he would actually run for presidency again in 2024. This type of, prevailing ideas are actually being sensitized by people. Among folks, who've been following Donald Trump, and literally, what? Who have been literally, what do we actually call this? Hanging on every word of his. They were actually desperate to witness the resurrection of Donald Trump. So this section of fervor is very much well reflected in a new sentiment called the Donald Trump once again, 2024.
Whether it's in 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, 16 years.
As Trump holds out, more people in his party are urging him to accept defeat. Fox News' Geraldo Rivera posted this message telling his friend his hard-fought race has come to an end.
You came so close in this election, but time coming soon to say goodbye with grace and dignity.
Karl Rove.
But, there are certain folks who actually wants to stay with Donald Trump, but there are, a growing number of people with the right mind saying that it's time for Donald Trump to acknowledge his defeat and swallow this bitter pill. Yeah, drink this goblet of poison. It's bitter. But the thing is, he's, Fran Gerald Rivera, and a Fox News host actually says that, he came so close, right? But he really lost the game. So it's time for him to understand the time comes really quickly. It's really, it wouldn't be better off if he ever actually, accepts the defeat with the grace and dignity, because the actual end is coming. So it's time for him to wave a white flag for sure. It's time for him to actually, say enough is enough, make a concession. Because the time is approaching really quickly to say a goodbye and drop out of it.
Rove, who advised the Trump campaign this year, wrote in a Wall Street Journal op-ed that Trump should do his part to unite the country by leading a peaceful transition and letting grievances go. At least.
And Karl Rove, who actually led Donald Trump's this year's election as a political strategist, wrote an op-ed column using the Wall Street Journal platform saying that it's time for Donald Trump to become a leader, to unify the nation on the verge of being split, because, he should have come out and act like a leader. He should have sounded presidential. No matter outgoing or incoming, you're a leader, and you should actually, not divide, but unify the nation by gathering people together and rallying people around the newly elected president to come, by actually, giving a pathway to a peaceful transition and letting, sorrow, painful complaints and grievances and emotions go. Please put that aside. Keep these, ugly feelings at bay, no matter how painful and sorrowful that might be. It doesn't matter. It's time for you to actually act like a president, to have every people, whatever type of racial backgrounds or political affiliations you might have, each voter and every citizen should come together in respect of the new president. Doesn't matter where you're standing and what type of religious beliefs or racial backgrounds or ethnicities you have or you are. It's time for the outgoing president to acknowledge him and opening up a door to the transition in a peaceful sense, by stifling the growing uproar or unrest among his supporters, driven by somewhat irrational ideas.
5 GOP senators are now publicly calling for Joe Biden to receive access to classified briefings the Trump administration has blocked.
And if that's not occurring by Friday, I will step in as well and to be able to push and to say this needs to occur.
The White House press secretary.
5 different Republican senators are openly issuing their statements, reflecting statement saying that President Donald Trump should clarify his position in order to give Joe Biden access to security briefing. Because the president-elect normally receives a security briefing gathered by the intel community in the United States. It means Joe Biden would be normally told what's happening throughout the nation, as well as all different classified and secret information relevant to national security and defense. He wouldn't be briefed on them, debriefed on them. That's exactly the same word. But these chances are being dismal at this moment because Donald Trump is blocking and impeding the procedures that should actually normally take place as of now. Because once the president-elect is clarified, his security clearance would be uplifted, and he or she would immediately gain access to all this secret information pivotal to national security and in American domestic and international affairs. But the problem is, Donald Trump refuses to recognize he's winning those. There is no authorization that was supposed to be given by the sitting president. Those Joe Biden is not being heard of. What's happening? So, with Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, who are there? Those are 5 different senators. They actually said that it's time for, President Donald Trump to make sure this to happen. Jeff Malarkey. He actually said if this, would have never actually happened, if this, does not happen by Friday, then I would actually step in to say further. I will actually take action available to discourage the president from demonstrating this type of ugly behaviors. Right? This should actually be suspended. Who are those people? James Lavorick. Let me actually see the picture. Chuck Grassley. James Malarkey. Who's this? Susan Collins. Lisa Murkowski. Well, that's interesting.
Classified briefings the Trump administration has blocked.
And if that's not occurring by Friday, I will step in as well and to be able to push and to say this needs to occur.
The White House press secretary, who is paid by U.S. taxpayers but appeared on Fox News today as a Trump campaign advisor, referred questions about whether Biden should receive intelligence briefings back to her own office today.
Has the president considered that?
I haven't spoken to the president about that. That would be a question more for the White House.
As Trump fights his...
Kate McEnany, Israel's press secretary of the White House, whose, wages are being paid by the U.S. taxpayers' money because she's a public servant, no matter how special that position is, right? But the problem is she actually, appeared on Fox News as President Donald Trump's campaign manager as a private worker who just actually, completely challenges the common sense of the rest of a public servant, saying something very political and unfounded, referring to the Joe Biden's qualification to receive secretive info, the classified or confidential info that would be privy to president or president-elect or former president. Former presidents are also being briefed on national security issues, but the actual scope and the extent might vary from the incumbent to former presidents for sure. But, within it's, I think, I don't really know, for at least, 10 or 15 years, these step down formal ex-presidents also pick up the very confidential information every morning. There would be, as the intel community official who just actually, brings file to him to let him be alerted on the very sensitive issue relevant to nation's security and defense and the whereabouts.
Legal battles, the White House is still dealing with the fallout from an indoor election night party now tied to several cases of COVID-19. Today, political advisor Corey Lewandowski tested positive, making him the 7th person who attended that party to do so.
Wow, that's a crazy. You remember that Donald Trump announced his victory very untimely. Because of that, there was indeed a celebration party, which was really eventually dampened by the chilly reality, right? But because of that, the entire White House staffers are actually reeling from the COVID-19 outbreaks because there were so many people who were infected from that party. So Corey Lewandowski, the campaign manager and a campaign worker, was indeed identified as the 7th victim of the COVID-19 from that party, because that was another super spreader event. But it's very funny. This time, there was no cost. It was really like champagne. You actually uncork the champagne too early. You somehow actually decide to celebrate a victory that eventually got nullified. That's very interesting. But that was a major super spreader. That means that so many people who were a part of that party with no masks or no face coverings, they were somehow affected by the COVID-19 outbreaks. They were actually, was devastated to have so many people tested positive for the virus. So Corey Lewandowski, he's really the 7th person. He was diagnosed with the COVID-19, so he marks the 7th person. That's a crazy.
Now, Jake, we have not heard from the president in person since last Thursday. I can't tell you how rare that is in the 4 years covering this White House that we've
You know what? That's very funny. Because you know what? The whole nation hasn't heard from Donald Trump since last Thursday. Ever since the last Thursday, Donald Trump refused to actually come out and make any type of public statement in person. Maybe, he should have done this, during the COVID prevalence. Maybe because of the COVID virus, he's not actually doing this. I don't know. That's so funny, right? But the thing is, it's really bizarre. She has been the White House correspondent for 40 years. She has been covering the vast majority of events taking place, on the Pennsylvania Avenue. But the problem is, it's almost one rarefied event. The White House correspondent would not hear any message from the president, sitting president of the United States in person directly. That's a very bizarre. Because, he's been playing at hide and seek. He's been actually, trying to have a hibernation. I don't know. He just wants to be detached from the media culture. So no one actually hears anything from him. And this has been that way since last Thursday. Why am I saying Friday? Because that guy, James Malarkey, said that if this, continues till Friday, if this does not occur, then I would actually probably step in and to actually gather and scramble the panel. But you know what? Last Friday was the last time. And that was the watershed. After that, Thursday, the 4th day of the week, there was a Wednesday, and immediately following from that Thursday, that was really the time when Donald Trump was actively seen. But after that Thursday, we have heard nothing from Donald Trump. And given her, history and a familiarity with the Washington culture, especially the White House, it's really peculiar because of that, for that many days passed by without actually, having a chance to hear anything from President of the United States in person. That's the real thing. Last Thursday was really the last time. Since last Thursday, we haven't actually seen him. We haven't actually heard anything from him in person. Only, hunting messages of his Twitter. Those are really the real revenant, right? Coming back.
Actually seen the president come out and speak to us directly, but that doesn't mean there's not a lot going on behind the scenes. And right now the buzz is whether or not the president is going to fire CIA Director Gina Haspel. He's been unhappy with her for some time now. He's been telegraphing that is something that he could be doing, especially recently over her opposition to declassifying documents related to Russian interference, though ultimately that decision...
So, Donald Trump is right now, but as I've already actually mentioned, that he was not actually seen. He has not been making any type of a public activity to be caught by the media since last Thursday. But that does not mean he's not doing much. He's been actually, somewhat plotting a very bizarre scheme, including the possible firing of Gina Haspel. Gina Haspel is a CIA director, successor of Mike Pompeo, who's been in charge of the CIA ever since Mike Pompeo was elevated to become the chief of the U.S. diplomacy, right? But the problem is, it's really tricky. Donald Trump is still tinkering with very bizarre ideas because he's been actually up to firing, that means removing Gina Haspel by standing her for packing. He's been allegedly toying with the notion of beheading Gina Haspel by giving her a pink slip. Donald Trump is eager to, get her sacked. That means you just really wants to remove that person from the position. Why? Because Gina Haspel allegedly declined to declassify very confidential files related to the Russian interference. As the head of the nation's intelligence community, by directing the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, Gina Haspel refused to accept Donald Trump's order to declassify the very clandestine and classified info privy to many of eligible operative, right? That's a real declassify means, you just actually make it public, at least to Donald Trump or some of the relevant folks. But the problem is, even actually Donald Trump should actually gain a security clearance to obtain this secret documents related to Russian interference investigation and the relevant info composed by this intelligence community. But the problem is, Gina Haspel, nominated by President Donald Trump, somehow became very much disobedient. She's not actually following the order given by Donald Trump. So he has been disgruntled with Gina Haspel for several months. So right now it became public that he's not happy with the current CIA director. So he's been very much, playing with the idea that he could remove her. He could behead her. He could send her for packing. He could actually, chop her off. Send her for packing means he could actually, fire her. Or he could actually give her a pink slip. Or he could actually get her sacked. Get her sacked means you actually need, hey, you gotta actually, sack yourself out. You gotta actually get yourself boxed out. You need to go. You have to, put all your stuff in a box and leave now because there is no desk for you. For that reason, you're sacked. Get someone sacked means, you are fired. Right? You get a pink slip. It means you're just actually, forgone. You're no longer part of our corporate culture. But the thing is, Donald Trump has not done that yet. But according to different sources, following from, gathered the sources, Donald Trump is playing footsie with the possible scenario of removing the head of the CIA because Gina Haspel was reluctant and not willing to open up the very secretive information because these classified publications should be declassified. That means it should actually be downgraded to be tradable. I can explain it. Declassified means it should be public. Not really public to general people like me, but it should at least, be downgraded and downgraded to be shared amongst the people in the White House. Even with the security clearance allowed to President of the United States, and he's a confidant, they need to actually obtain a specified access permission because the intel community's files and the dossiers are not normally accessible even to Donald Trump. But Gina Haspel persistently turned down this pressure coming from the president. So it's really no secret the President of the United States was very much irritated to see this act of disobedience. So he's been right now very much into removing her or having her out of office. So this is really scary. Whatever, he's up to. Why in the first place he's been actually, so obsessed with the reshuffling the major players in the Intel community. Because anyway, he's about to go out. He's no longer be the master of the Oval Office. Then his political life is over normally. And that, in that phase, people would be in a very conciliatory mood. They're not going to actually, kick someone out. They're not going to actually fire someone. Because anyhow, there will be a new transition team that would eventually toast. They will eventually toast up the cabinet. So it's really kind of futile and useless. There's no point. What's the point of him picking out a new director of the CIA? That seems really bizarre. But it's more likely to be found in his personal reason. He's yearning for, prying into, the classified confidential files related to Russian investigation. That would be the reason. He just really wants to see that. He just really wants to peruse what's in it. Probably. I think, he's trying to save his face, probably. There would be, something really serious about the Russian interference. So he's been afraid of the backfire if the new government would have come in. So he could even actually face a prison time. Maybe that's really the reason he wants to manipulate the major contents of it. But his trial was already foiled because Gina Haspel, Gina Haspel is blocking the gateway. I don't know. Who knows?
Is President Trump's and President Trump's alone. But Jake, I am told there have been many discussions inside the White House over the last few days about whether or not Trump should fire her. And while Republican lawmakers are coming to her defense on Capitol Hill, there is not a lot of defense happening for her inside the West Wing at this moment.
So it's really interesting. Amongst the Republican lawmakers, there were actually huge support for Gina Haspel. But in the West Wing, there's a culture of a sycophant. There exists almost not many objection. That means the people surrounding Donald Trump's atmosphere, they would say yes to him. So there are not many people who might say no to Donald Trump's plan to fire her. But Republican lawmakers are very much interested in keeping the legitimacy by being opposed to Donald Trump. No. It's true. The GOP lawmakers are opposed to removing Gina Haspel. I don't actually think it's really difficult. What else can I say? Because you know what, and the culture, if you ever actually look deeper into the West Wing, the people packing up his milieu would be so loyal to his presidency and to him. They were supposed to demonstrate fealty to him. So it would be difficult for them to muster up their courage to say no matter how ridiculous it might be. But the problem is, right now in the Congress, on the Capitol Hill, the GOP legislators, they're more likely, heading towards the region. So they would actually think this plan is really absurd and it's really senseless. Why in the first place you would like to remove Gina Haspel, who's been doing a great job? It's really kind of on a politically divided viewpoints, even amongst the Republicans. Whether you actually belong to the White House, whether you belong to Capitol Hill, there's a rift between GOP members.
That's right. Gina Haspel, the CIA director, and other intelligence officials are saying that to release this information would compromise sources and methods for intelligence and thus national security. But there are others in that building that have other priorities besides national security. Caitlin Collins, thanks.
Oh. So when Gina Haspel and other intelligence officials actually say that, if one actually reveals this type of a secret information, then that would actually compromise the national security, because there are very sensitive materials closely related to national defense and domestic security. So would it be imprudent if one actually, would kneel down to or cave into president's pressure? Because, if you somehow open up that kind of classified info, then that would actually somehow hamper the method and the conduct of the investigation and the future development of the inquiry. Everything is at stake once you actually decide to open up this type of a secretive info. The way you actually can operate this investigation, and the sources who actually already made a contribution to this development, every possible factor could be in jeopardy. And the following consequence is the domestic security would have faced a significant setback, or it could even actually be endangered. That's really the reason there are growing concerns. But folks are from different sides. They were actually thinking in a different way. Maybe this would be relevant. The president can definitely always exercise his power to look into the classified information related to or directly relevant to the national security. If and only if this info is pertinent to the way we actually defend our nation, the way we serve our nation, then President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, should actually gain access to it. Those are people who are actually concerned with different agendas. That's the real reason they think in a different way. But much of people from the intelligence community, they were actually really against the notion. In that way, their proper conduct or even sources could be undermined and sabotaged, then that would definitely pose a threat to national security. That's really the concern. Can I just shut up?